Well, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be going over Visa, MasterCard, Interchange for retail and restaurants. I have found over the years that the most important thing that you need to know is about 20 to 25 levels of interchange. When you're talking to a merchant, you must act as though you are the expert. And by doing that, you're going to build the trust with that merchant, and the merchant is going to want to do business with you. I have found the best way for you to do well in this industry is to be educated at your craft. If you learn these levels of interchange, when you go out and talk to a merchant, your confidence level is going to be very high, and you're not going to be as nervous, especially for the new people that are on the call. So the first thing we're going to be going over is a qualified interchange. And what that means is the interchange levels is perceived by different factors. One of them is the risk of that transaction. A qualified sale is going to have a lower risk. There are more than 300 levels of interchange, and we have mid-qualified, we have non-qualified, we have corporate, we have international card. So what we're going to be going over is really just the cards that are going to affect the retail merchants. Another reason for interchange to change is the benefits or rewards that are given back to the cardholder. And these rewards would be let's say you have a MasterCard and it's connected to a World card or an Enhanced card or a World Elite card. Or if it's a Visa, it could be a reward card. It could be a signature card. And what happens is, even though these points are given to the cardholder, the actual interchange increase to cover those costs are passed on to the merchants. So the first one I'm going to go over is a retail credit card for both retail merchants and restaurants. Now this is a swipe sale where the credit card has no benefits or rewards attached to it. So there are three levels that I'm going to go over that will make up the interchange for this card. The statements that you will see from EPSG will have them broken down exactly like this. When you send in a statement to us, we are going to do the proposal where we take all these fees and we bundle them into one fees for the proposal. So for interchange, this is the fee that is passed on to the issuing bank. The rate for a Visa card is 1.51%. Visa and MasterCard adds dues and assessment fees to each of these transactions, and for a regular credit card, the increase would be 0.13%, and 100% of those funds goes to Visa in order to, I guess, pay for all their advertising and all of the information that they must have to run this card. Visa came up with, in probably around 2004, another what's called a discount per item fee, or a DPI fee. And that fee on a retail credit card is 10 cents. So if we take all of those fees together for a retail credit card on Visa that is taken either in a restaurant or a retail location, the rate that we are charged for this card is 1.64% and 10 cents per transaction, or DPI fee. If you are setting up a merchant on a interchange or cost plus basis, all of these are going to be shown on the statement. The next we're going to do is MasterCard. Now Visa has about 64% of the marketplace for credit cards. MasterCard has about 36% if you take just Visa and MasterCard. So MasterCard, to entice more banks to issue their card, are going to give back more interchange to that bank. So for a regular retail card taken at a merchant's restaurant or retail location, the interchange that is passed along to the issuing bank is 1.58%. The dues and assessment fees are 0.12%, slightly lower than Visa, and I am certain that MasterCard will be raising that quite soon. The DPI fee, or the discount per item fee, is 10 cents. So for a MasterCard that is not connected to any benefits or rewards, that is swiped at a merchant location, the rate is 1.70 and 10 cents per transaction. MasterCard calls this transaction a merit-free transaction because it is swiped through a terminal. The next is a little bit more complicated. What I'm going to be going through is the offline debit check cards that are what's called regulated. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, Senator Durbin took Visa and MasterCard to court, and they said because the perceived risk of a card that's attached to a checking account is much lower, you must adjust your interchange to reflect that. So what has happened is Visa and MasterCard has lowered the interchange to a very, very low rate of 0.05%. The dues and assessments for Visa are 0.13%. These just went up from 0.11% last year, so they're a little bit higher this year. MasterCard dues and assessment is 0.12%. We also have a discount per item fee of 21 cents. And this is given to Visa and MasterCard because they did lose a tremendous amount of revenue from lowering the rates on debit cards. So for a Visa regulated debit card, the rate is 0.18% and 21 cents per transaction. For MasterCard, it's 0.17% and 21 cents per transaction. This type of sale really affects a low average ticket merchant because of the high cost of the DPI fee of 21 cents. A regulated debit card is made up of any bank that has over $10 billion in assets. Any debit card that is tied to Visa or MasterCard that is issued to their customers will be called a regulated Durbin card. Non-regulated debit cards are an offline debit transaction from a bank that has less than $10 billion in assets. And what I mean by offline debit cards is the card is taken at the retail location and it's swiped through a terminal and no PIN number is put in there. So for a restaurant and retail, for this transaction of a non-regulated debit check card, the rates are a little bit different. For a retail merchant, the rate is 0.80% for Visa. For a restaurant, the rate is 1.19% for Visa. The assessment fees are 0.13%. The discount per item, or the DPI fee, is 15 cents. So in a retail location, a debit card that is not connected to a bank of $10 billion or more, the retail rate would be 0.93%, and the DPI would be 15 cents. For a restaurant, they raised the rate to 1.19%, and I have a little typo here. For a restaurant, the rate is 1.32%, but the DPI fee is significantly lower at 10 cents, which helps a lot of restaurants where their average ticket is much lower than it usually would be in a retail store. A lot of restaurants have average tickets of $20, $15, $30, and Visa realized that if it's a restaurant and it's a non-regulated card, that the DPI fee would really affect them. A white tablecloth restaurant, the average ticket is $100, so that 5 cents is really insignificant. Now again, this is a qualified check or debit card from a non-regulated bank. So these are called qualified transactions. MasterCard is slightly different. Again, they're going to give a higher rate of interchange back to the issuing bank. The restaurant is the same at 1.19%, but for a retail merchant that accepts a non-regulated debit or check card, the rate would be 1.05%. The dues and assessment fees is 12 cents per 0.12%, and the discount per item fee for a retail establishment is 15 cents. For a restaurant, it's 10 cents. So the total fees paid for a MasterCard offline non-regulated qualified debit check card, which means it was swiped through a terminal, is for a restaurant 1.31% and 10 cents per item, and for retail is 1.17% and 15 cents per item. Another qualified transaction is a Visa prepaid and MasterCard prepaid transaction. Now again, we have in each of these transactions the assessment fees and the discount per item fee. So as we go on now, I'm just going to go over what the card is and the total fees paid. Everybody should understand now that there are other factors that come into the rate, which would be the interchange, the dues and assessments, and the discount per item fee. A prepaid Visa or MasterCard is just a card that you would go into your local bank, you would put $400 down, they would give you a prepaid Visa or MasterCard for $400, and now you have a Visa or MasterCard with a $400 limit. So the rate for a prepaid debit card for Visa is 1.28%, and for MasterCard it's 1.27%. There is also a 15 cent per item fee. What we're going to go through now is a mid-qualified transaction. A mid-qualified transaction for a retail merchant or restaurant merchant are different, but I'm going to go over most of those right now that are going to affect the merchants that you talk to. So the first thing I'm going to go over is for a retail or restaurant where the Visa card is what's called a rewards card. Reward points are given to the consumer, and of course, Mr. Merchant is now going to pay a higher fee to cover those costs. So for a retail swiped reward card, the rate that the merchant would pay on interchange is 1.78% and 10 cents per transaction or DPI fee. Now, a signature card for a retail merchant and for a restaurant are quite different. A restaurant, the rate is significantly higher, and here's the reason. All signature cards have on the back of the card an 800 number that you can call for what's called a concierge service. Visa went to combat the stronghold that American Express had on the travel and entertainment industry. And this started about 15, 20 years ago. And what they did is they copied a lot of the things that Amex did great. So the concierge service is very simple. In a retail establishment, it's not going to be used as much, so the rate would be the same as a reward card. The rate for a retail signature card is 1.78% and 10 cent DPI fee. But for a restaurant or any merchant that's in the travel and entertainment industry, the rate is significantly higher. And the reason for that is, let's say I wanted to take one of the employees here out to a very nice dinner in New York City. I'm from Long Island, and I wanted to go to the Four Seasons restaurant. Well, I would call up the Four Seasons restaurant, and they would have no reservations available. Well, Visa, and well, MasterCard does this also. Visa has gone to all the high-end restaurants and blocked out a couple of tables in each one of them for their signature card holder. So if I called the 800 number after I couldn't get the reservation by calling directly to the Four Seasons, and Visa had a table open for me, they would have then made that reservation for me and also asked if there's anything else that I needed. If I needed a car service to pick me up, they would do that. If I wanted to take a helicopter tour around New York City, they would do that for me also. And poor Mr. Merchant is now paying a significantly higher rate of 2.43% and 10-cent DPI fee. Again, the merchants are paying for these services that the issuing bank is advertising and giving to their consumers. MasterCard came out with what's called a World Card, and this World Card is the same as a Visa Reward Card. It just doesn't give as many points back. So a World Card that's taken in a retail establishment or in a restaurant where there is no tip adjustment, the rate is a little bit higher than a Visa Reward Card, and the rate is 1.90% and 10-cent DPI fee. This is considered a mid-qualified transaction, the same as a Visa Reward Card. As soon as you take a Visa signature card in a restaurant, it is considered now a non-qualified transaction because that rate is significantly higher. But in a retail location or a restaurant, a MasterCard World Card where no tip is adjusted and it's swiped to a terminal, it is considered a mid-qualified transaction. A MasterCard World Card, and I'm putting this in with the mid-qualified, that has a tip adjustment is considered a non-qualified transaction. The actual rate is significantly higher at 2.42% and 10-cent DPI fee. Again, it's the travel and entertainment industry. MasterCard is giving double the points back or some other item to the cardholders if they use their World Card in a restaurant. MasterCard came out with what's called an enhanced card, and the rate is the same whether it's a retail or restaurant or if a tip's adjusted for now. So the rate for a MasterCard enhanced card is 1.85% and 10-cent DPI fee. An enhanced card is just giving more reward points back to the consumer, and the issuing banks are giving out the enhanced card, again, because the interchange rate is higher than a Visa reward card, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but a 0.05% on billions of dollars of money that is charged every year at an issuing bank is a tremendous amount of money to them. Again, they're just trying to get more of a market share. Visa has a stronghold, and they want to pull some of that away from it by charging a higher rate and giving more money back to the issuing bank. Another card that's considered a mid-qualified transaction is a Visa card that is keyed or an e-commerce card that is entered into a computer. To get this rate, a merchant must do what's called an AVS, or address verification. And what that means is in a retail location, a merchant must have the zip code match the billing zip code of the cardholder. In an e-commerce transaction, to get this mid-qualified rate, it must be the zip code and the CVV code in order to get this rate. It is considerably higher if the zip code and the CVV code is not put in, because the perceived risk to the issuing bank is much higher because there's a lot of fraud that goes on when a merchant keys in a transaction, and there is a lot of fraud on an e-commerce or a mail order, telephone order merchant. By putting in the zip code and having that match, the actual merchant is now a little bit safer and more satisfied that the sale is legitimate. The sale will be approved whether or not the zip code matches or the CVV code is entered, but it will alert the merchant that something may be wrong here and you better be careful of this sale. So the rate for a Visa keyed in with an address verification is 1.93% and 10-cent DPI fee. Again, this is mid-qualified. I feel mid-qualified is any card that's under like 2.04 or 5% or below. Anything over that I would feel is non-qualified. MasterCard doesn't look at risk as heavily as Visa. So they're going to not require address verification to be done, but the merchant will be prompt for the address if they key in a transaction, regardless of whether or not it's a Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or Amex, because Discover and Discover requires it, American Express is starting to require it, and MasterCard is not that far behind. So a card not present or keyed in transaction on MasterCard, which would be a MasterCard credit card, is also called a Merit 1 transaction. So whenever you see a World Merit 1, Enhanced Merit 1, that means that that transaction was actually keyed in. So the rate for a MasterCard keyed transaction, or Merit 1, is 2.02% and 10-cent DPI fee. There is another reason for a transaction to go to Merit 1, and I'll go over that later when I go over some of the non-qualified fees. So now we have non-qualified. Now this is any reward card that is keyed in. A reward card that's keyed in, the rate is going to be much higher at 2.08% and 10-cent DPI fee. But in order for this reward card to qualify at this rate, they must do an address verification. If they do not, it's going to drop to an interchange level, which is called IRF. And I'll go over that in a little while. And that's probably one of the most important interchange levels that you know, because it will help you when you're looking at merchant statements from other companies. So again, for a reward card that is keyed in a retail location with the zip code verification, the rate is 2.08% and 10-cent DPI fee. For a signature card that is taken at a retail location and the zip code is entered, it's the same as a reward card, 2.08% and 10 cents per transaction. When you're looking at statements from other companies, these transactions will be called reward or reward keyed, reward card not present, or reward 2. Same thing with signature. It will be signature keyed, signature card not present, or signature sorry about that. I just had a computer glitch. I'm going to go to the next one. So here's the most important one of all, of Visa transactions, and it is called IRF. This is the one that I can go up to people who have been in this industry for 20 years and they haven't really mastered their craft. They won't even know what this means. They'll know it's a non-qualified transaction. They'll have no idea of why it's non-qualified. So here's the reason for an IRF transaction. If a merchant keys in a transaction and does not enter the zip code or CVV code if it's an e-commerce, the rate will drop to IRF, and that would be 2.43%. There are two reasons there's two other reasons for a transaction to drop to IRF. And that would be if a merchant does not close out his terminal or her terminal in a timely fashion. For Visa, Visa requires a terminal to be closed out within 48 hours of the authorization. If that terminal is not closed out or settled within 48 hours, every transaction that is 48 hours or older will drop to an interchange level which is called IRF or non-qualified. There is one other way in which a transaction can drop to IRF, and that is if a restaurant takes a Visa card. Let's say you're in ABC Food Market or and it's a high-end restaurant, and the bill comes to $100. When the wait staff goes over to the POS, a piece of equipment, and swipes that card through the terminal, it's actually approving for $100 plus a 20% tolerance. This way, when the wait staff brings back the bill to the consumer then can add their tip. If that restaurant is doing a fantastic job and the food is great, the wait staff is great, the place is clean, and the consumer wants to leave in excess of that 20%, that sale will not now drop to an IRF transaction because it's a higher risk to the issuing bank because it only approved it for 20% over the ticket. The sale, if you put a 50% sale in, the sale will still be approved. The risk is higher to the issuing bank because they must pay on that, but they're going to charge a higher fee for that. So this is what's called a non-qualified transaction. So let's say you're out there and you're talking to a merchant and you see their statement has a lot of Visa non-qualified sales on it, and it's a retail merchant. What you can do to probe is ask them whether or not they key in a lot of transactions, and if they're doing an address verification. A lot of processors are not even going to have the terminal prompt for it because they want it to drop to a non-qualified transaction so they can surcharge the merchant even more. But all of our programs are going to prompt for a zip code verification. So let's say the retail merchant says no, they're not doing any key transaction. Well, you have to ask the merchant again in a retail establishment whether or not they're closing out their terminal in a timely fashion. Retail merchants and restaurants are notorious. They're too busy on the weekend. They're exhausted. They go home, and then Monday afternoon they'll come and they'll settle their terminal. Well, that not only delays when they get their money, it also is going to make a lot of those transactions drop to IRF. So those are the things, the prying questions that you can ask of a retail merchant. If it is a restaurant, very simply ask those first two questions. If those first two questions are no, well, you can tell that restaurant that really it's a good problem that you have. It must mean that your wait staff and your food and your customers are very happy, and they're leaving in excess of 20% tips. You'll see now on a lot of POS pieces of equipment for restaurants, they'll do a suggested tip line, 15%, 18%, 20%. They don't go over 20% because they know if you leave more than 20% that the actual sale is going to drop to a higher interchange level, costing that restaurant a tremendous amount of money. There is another interchange level, what is called non-qualified. And for Visa, that is called standard. Standard for Visa is very simply put, there's a couple of ways in which a transaction can drop to standard legitimately. A lot of statements that you look at are going to bunch a lot of things into standard so they can charge a higher level of interchange, but there's no way for you to pull that out if they're not going to give you each line item. So a standard transaction could mean one of two things. It could be that the transactions in that terminal have not been settled within 72 hours. So for Visa, that is the time limit for a sale. If it hasn't closed out or settled within 72 hours, that transaction is going to drop to a very high interchange level, which is called standard. Another reason for a transaction to drop to standard would be that, let's say someone has a credit card terminal and their telephone line or their internet has some glitches in it. Well, someone will go to that terminal and swipe a card through. Enough information will be able to be passed through to approve that sale, but all of the information that's on that magnetic strip may not have gotten through. Well, of course, the Visa and MasterCard are going to approve that sale, but they're going to charge that merchant a higher rate. This is not a frequent charge. I don't see it that often. I probably look at 30 to 40 competitive statements per day in helping our analyst department come up with proposals for everybody. But if it's on a statement, then you must address it and say that there could be two reasons. One, you have a problem with closing out your terminal in a timely fashion, or you may have some glitches on your line. I don't want you to ever kill a sale, so I would be very careful in telling a merchant that they have problems with their phone line or internet line. They really don't want to hear that. They want to make sure that when you come in there, you save them money, tell them about your service, and the switch from any processor to us is seamless to them, and it's a very, very simple, it's just like turning a light switch on and off. So, the least things that you put in there that shows that the merchant is not doing something correctly or there's something wrong, the better off you are to make the sale. All corporate cards for Visa and MasterCard are considered non-qualified. Corporate cards are a little bit complicated. I'm just going to go over the different ones and just so you know what they are for keyed, for swipe. So for a regular corporate card Visa, the rate is 2.28%. For a card not present Visa card, the rate would be 2.78% and 10-cent DPI. Now that's for a corporate card, but there are different cards. For a commercial corporate card that's standard, the rate is significantly higher at 3.08%. So here's another corporate card and different rates for corporate cards for Visa. Visa came out with what's called a signature preferred corporate card. And that's really to combat the stronghold that American Express has on corporations where they issue a lot of credit cards, issue a lot of cards to corporate clients so that they can use them for travel and entertainment. So Visa has done the same thing. They have the concierge service. They give extra points back. So it's kind of mirror imaging what an American Express card is. So for a signature preferred swipe sale, the rate is 2.23% and 10-cent DPI fee. For a card not present keyed in transaction for a signature card that has an AVS attached to it or address verification, the rate is 2.53%. A signature preferred card that is taken from a merchant who is a business-to-business type merchant where their SIT code is a business and let's say Staples selling to us as a company, that's a business-to-business transaction. The rate is 2.23% and 10-cent DPI fee. Another non-qualified transaction is a World Keyed or Merit 1 card. Again, that's that you're keying in that transaction. The risk is higher to the issuing bank, and the rate is 2.18% and 10-cent DPI fee. For an enhanced card that is keyed in or Merit 1, the rate is 2.17%. Again, that's over that threshold of had about 2.02, 2.04%, where I figure a mid-qualified turns into a non-qualified. MasterCard came out with a card that is for very, very similar to the signature card that Visa has, where it has a concierge service. They do more for the cardholder. So these are called elite or high value credit cards from MasterCard. And the rate that the merchant would pay is 2.32% and 10-cent DPI fee. If you key in that transaction, and again, MasterCard doesn't force you to do a address verification, the rate is 2.63%. There is another part of MasterCard which they changed about a year and a half ago. If an average sale is over $1,000, they raised the interchange by 0.01%. So, and also if it's a keyed-in transaction, the rate is raised by 0.01%. So here's a level of interchange for MasterCard, and it's called face-to-face or level 2. The rate is 2.27% for a corporate face-to-face or level 2. For a data rate 1, which means that it is a keyed-in corporate card, the rate is 2.42 and 10 cents. Again, for MasterCard, a keyed-in transaction does not have to have the zip code verification. Again, MasterCard, if a card drops to standard, it would be the same reason as Visa, but the only difference is MasterCard looks at risk a little differently. So a standard transaction for MasterCard means that if a merchant has not closed out or settled their terminal within 96 hours, every single transaction that is in there that is 96 hours or older will drop to standard. MasterCard also requires merchants to close out within 72 hours. If a merchant does not close out any transactions within 72 hours, all of those transactions would drop to what's called Merit 1, which would be the same increase as if it was keyed in. Again, MasterCard is 72 for Merit 1, 96 for standard. Visa for IRF is 48 hours. For standard is 72. So Visa looks at risk a little bit stronger than MasterCard. For a standard retail location, for a standard retail card from MasterCard, the rate again is 3.07 and 10 cents, the same as it is for a corporate card. So MasterCard has come out with a couple of different levels of interchange that what's called small ticket or convenient transaction. And the reason for that is they wanted to force the very, very low average ticket merchant like a McDonald's or Wendy's or Chick-fil-A to accept credit card. So what they did is they raised the actual rate for a small ticket credit card or retail or signature to 1.78%, but they lowered the most significant portion of that for a low average ticket merchant, the per transaction fee or the DPI, down to 4 cents. For a check card that is non-regulated, they also raised the rate to 1.68%, but they lowered the discount per item fee to 4 cents. So for Visa to be small ticket, the transaction must be under $15. For MasterCard, they've increased that average ticket up to $25. And MasterCard probably did one better than Visa. They raised their rate to 2.02%, but they charged a 0 cent DPI fee. So let's say if you take a merchant, a restaurant, and they take a credit card and the DPI fee is 0.10%, and we divide it by an $8 average ticket, that's 1.25% higher because the average ticket is so much lower. So in the average ticket lower category, the lower the DPI fee or discount per item fee, the better off the merchant is. So offline debit cards that are small ticket from MasterCard, the rate is 1.67% and 4-cent DPI fee. So really, what is the benefit of learning about interchange? Is when you're out there talking to merchant, you can explain to that merchant by converting over to you as their processor and you setting them up on what's called cost plus, that you're going to reveal the margin that you make from that merchant to cover your internal costs and your profit margin. Everything else is going to be interchange that is passed back to Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express. So everything is divulged to that merchant, and you're trying to build trust. By setting a merchant up on Cost Plus, all increases and decreases in assessment fees will be passed along to that merchant at the exact cost. There's clear check card pricing. We have regulated, non-regulated. We do not surcharge corporate cards, reward cards, mid-qualified, non-qualified. We actually pass along the exact cost to that merchant. There's clear small ticket pricing, and we fully disclose everything to that merchant. And what that does, it creates trust. And by creating trust, you are no longer a salesperson. You're more of a consultant. You want to educate the merchant, build trust with that merchant, and the sales will get easier and easier. Here's the way I used to sell, and it's been quite a while since I've been selling because I've been running this business, but what I would do with a merchant is I would explain the interchange to them based on what I see on their statement. I would then explain to the merchant that I am going to set them up. If they're already on Interchange Plus, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set them up the same way. The only difference is my profit margin would be less. If a merchant is set up on tiered pricing, I would explain to that merchant that tiered pricing only benefits the processor because they can hide their profit margin in their rate. And I would say to that merchant, by converting to us, I will come back after the first full month of processing, and I will prove to you that the savings that I say I am giving you comes true. And at that time, I will then ask you for some referrals of people that you know that would like to be treated finally with integrity and someone fully disclosing to them. So I'm building a trust with that merchant even by saying I will ask for a referral after I prove to you that what I say will come true. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. What I do is I do have just a few questions, I think, from Jonathan Spatz, is if a merchant has the card present and they're on recurring billing, well, the recurring billing is always going to end up being a keyed-in transaction after the first swipe, Jonathan. And there's no way for us to differentiate between whether or not it's keyed or swiped. The information is held in that terminal. The swipe is not held in that terminal. In the software that they're using, I'm sorry. So that would be the only thing that would be able to happen, is it would be considered a keyed-in transaction. Well, everybody, happy selling, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.